The sun was sinking behind the Red Rock cliffs when Clara James pushed her way out of Red Butte's trading post with the force of a woman determined not to cry in public. The wooden door smacked the wall behind her, drawing the attention of half the dusty street, but she didn't slow down. Her cheeks burned with frustration, and her heartbeat was thudding so loudly she hardly heard the creak of wagon wheels or the low chatter of evening settlers. Of all people in this forsaken little town, why did he have to be the one who tested her patience? Talon Black Fox, Cherokee scout, horse tracker, and the most aggravatingly observant man she had ever met. She had marched into the trading post to buy lamp oil, and ended up locked in an argument she never intended to have. Talon had been speaking with Sheriff Holloway about the recent thefts, missing horses, stolen supplies, a settler's chicken coop cleaned out with suspicious precision. Clara had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong moment. One question, one comment, and suddenly Talon was looking at her with that intense, assessing stare of his. "You're hiding something," he had said, not accusingly, but with an infuriating steadiness that suggested he was already certain Clara wasn't hiding anything. Not really. But she knew one of her students had overheard whispers behind the schoolhouse. She hadn't told anyone yet, wanting to protect the boy until she understood more. She had no proof, no details, just a frightened look in a child's eyes and a bad feeling in her gut. And she wasn't about to be interrogated by a man who spoke in clipped sentences and seemed to think glaring counted as conversation. So she had walked away, stormed away, furious, embarrassed, and absolutely done with Talon Black Fox. She didn't hear the wagon coming from her right, didn't see the mule pulling the load of mining equipment. Everything happened in a blur until a strong arm wrapped around her waist and yanked her backward with surprising gentleness and absolute authority. "Hold up," a deep voice growled right beside her ear. Clara gasped, breath catching as she found herself steadying against Talon's chest. He released her as soon as the wagon rattled past, but the imprint of his touch lingered like a brand. She spun around, anger and embarrassment warring inside her. "You can't just grab people like that," she snapped. Talon didn't flinch. He stood tall, the late sun outlining the sharp plane of his jaw and the dark sweep of his hair tied back with a simple leather cord. His eyes, deep, steady, and unreadable, held hers without apology. "You walk away when I'm done talking," he said, voice low, roughened by frustration. "Especially when there's danger you don't see." Clara's breath hitched. The words weren't a command, though they were stern enough to spark heat in her face. They were a warning, a protective one, and that only made her more flustered. "I wasn't walking into danger," she argued, though they both knew she had been seconds from being run down. "You were," Talon said simply, "and you know it." He wasn't smug. He wasn't lecturing. He was concerned. Not that he'd ever admit it outright. She folded her arms, trying to regain whatever dignity she hadn't scattered across the main street. "I can take care of myself." Talon glanced down at the dusty wagon tracks, then back at her. "You don't have to prove that every waking moment." His calm tone felt like another tug at her ribs, gentle but impossible to ignore. Clara swallowed hard. "You accused me of hiding something." "I said you were avoiding something," he corrected, as though accuracy mattered more than her pride. "There's trouble stirring around Red Butte. People talk to you. Kids trust you. You see things the rest of us don't." She stiffened. The fact that he noticed her sent an unexpected flutter through her. "So what is it you think I'm not saying?" she challenged. Talon held her gaze for a long moment. The street seemed to quiet around them, dust floating lazily between the gold of sunset and the rising shadows. "I think," he said slowly, "that something scared one of your students, and you've been trying to shoulder it." Alone, her pulse stumbled. He wasn't guessing. He was reading her like she was open ground under a cloudless sky, and she hated how vulnerable that made her feel. Clara opened her mouth to argue, to deny, to deflect, but the words wouldn't come. Talon's steady presence made lying feel pointless. Finally, she exhaled. "This isn't the place." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." Another wagon rumbled by. A dog barked somewhere near the barber shop. The air smelled of dust, smoke, and the lingering heat of day. "Tomorrow," Talon said, stepping back but not breaking eye contact. "We talk tomorrow. And you don't walk away until we're done." Clara bristled, but she didn't disagree, because deep down, she knew he was right. And that terrified her more than any outlaw ever could. By morning, Red Butte felt different, not louder, not busier, but tighter, like the whole town was holding its breath. Clara sensed it the moment she stepped outside her small teacher's cottage with her school books pressed to her chest. The usual chatter of miners heading toward the canyons was muted. The shopkeepers sweeping their porches paused more often to look over their shoulders. Even the desert wind felt uneasy, carrying the faint metallic scent of dust stirred by too many horses moving at night. Something was wrong, and Clara knew, without wanting to admit it, that Talon Black Fox had felt it long before anyone else. Her first class hadn't even begun when little Henry Davis tugged at her sleeve, eyes wide and restless. "Miss James?" he whispered. "Pa says there's trouble again. Sighed I should come straight home after school." Clara knelt so she could meet the boy's gaze. "Did he say what kind of trouble?" Henry shook his head quickly, too quickly. His fingers twisted in the fabric of his shirt. She knew fear when she saw it. It was the same look she'd seen on the boy days before, right after he darted behind the schoolhouse as though he'd heard something that didn't belong. She hadn't pressed him then. Now she wondered if she should have. "Henry," she said softly, "if you hear something, or if someone scares you, you can always talk to me." The boy bit his lip and nodded, but he didn't elaborate. It set a weight in her stomach. The rest of the morning passed, but Clara barely registered her lessons. She moved through the motions, reciting arithmetic, correcting handwriting, mediating a dispute over a broken pencil, yet her mind kept drifting to Talon's words. "Kids trust you. You see things the rest of us don't." The trouble was, Talon saw too much. She wasn't used to being understood so quickly, so sharply. At noon, she dismissed the children early so their families could keep them close. As she swept chalk dust from the blackboard, a shadow crossed the doorway. Clara didn't need to look up to know who it was. She felt his presence first, the quiet steadiness, the way the air always seemed to settle when he walked into a room. "You said we'd talk," Talon said. Clara turned. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, hair slightly wind-tossed from riding. He looked as if he hadn't slept. There was an edge to his posture, as if he was coiled to spring at the slightest threat. "What is happening in town?" she asked. Talon stepped inside and closed the door behind him. She noticed the fine dust on his boots, the faint cut on his cheekbone like he'd pushed through thorned brush. "Tracks," he said. "Fresh. Too many horses moving near the river last night. Supplies missing from the general store this morning." And his gaze flicked to her face. "Someone tried to get into the schoolhouse before dawn." Clara's heart lurched. "What? Nothing was taken," Talon added. "They weren't after supplies." Her throat tightened. "Then what were they after?" "You," he said without hesitation. The word landed heavy and cold. "But why?" "Because you're useful," he answered. "You know the families. You know who stores what, who keeps money in their homes, which ranchers have extra horses. Outlaws don't just steal, they plan. And they look for leverage." She sank into a chair, stunned. It didn't seem real, someone wanting to use her to hurt this town she'd come to love. Talon stepped closer, voice low. "You said one of your students heard something." Clara hesitated, torn between protecting Henry and protecting everyone else. He heard voices, she admitted. Men talking behind the schoolhouse 2 days ago. He said they were arguing about a list. Her hands shook. A list of which homes to hit first. Talon swore under his breath, a rare break in his controlled demeanor. Why didn't you come to me? He asked, not angry, not accusing, but wounded that she hadn't trusted him. Clara straightened. Because I didn't know what I was dealing with. Because I didn't want to drag a child into dangerous business. Because I thought you could handle it alone, he finished, his eyes softening. Clara, you're brave. But bravery without backup gets people killed. Her breath caught. He wasn't lecturing. Her doubt he was afraid for her doubt, and that realization shook her more than all the danger lurking. Outside, a sharp whistle suddenly rang from the main. Street one long, one short. Talon stiffened instantly. That's the sheriff, he said. There's news. What kind of news? His jaw tightened. The kind we don't ignore. Talon offered his hand, not commanding this time, but asking. Clara hesitated only a second before taking it. Whatever was coming, she wouldn't be facing it alone. Sheriff Holloway was waiting in the middle of Red Butte's Main Street when Clara and Talon arrived, his thumbs hooked into his belt and his face carved with worry. A small circle of townsfolk hovered nearby, ranch wives, miners, merchants, all speaking in hushed tones. The tension in the air was thick enough to taste. Black Fox, the sheriff called as Talon approached. I was hoping you'd show. Talon's posture sharpened. What happened? The sheriff gestured for him and Clara to follow him toward the hitching post in front of the general store. Clara felt eyes tracking her every step. She wasn't used to being the focus of attention in Red Butte, and now the stares felt weighted with suspicion, fear, and something else she couldn't name. The sheriff cleared his throat. One of the ranchers came in at dawn. Said he caught sight of strangers camped near the foothills, 5 or 6 men. Armed heavy. Didn't like the look of them. Talon's eyes narrowed. Did he follow them? No, said there were too many. And he wasn't armed enough to be stupid. The sheriff sighed. Tracks lead toward the river. Just like the ones you found. Clara wrapped her arms around herself. The chilly morning wind cut through her thin shawl, but it was the sheriff's next words that sent a shiver down her spine. They're watching the town, Holloway said. Studying us. And we don't know why. Talon glanced at Clara, and she knew instantly what he was thinking. They want information. And she might have it. The sheriff followed his gaze and cleared his throat. Miss James, I hear you're good at getting people to talk, especially the young ones. Clara stiffened. I don't like where this is going. Well, you won't like this either. The sheriff put his hands on his hips. I want you and Black Fox to work together. Talk to your students. Find out what that boy told you and anything else he might have heard. Clara blinked. Just like that? No discussion? The sheriff's expression softened, but only slightly. Clara, you're the one the kids trust most. And Talon's the best scout we've got. Those outlaws are organizing themselves. We can't afford to guess their next move. Talon said nothing, but she felt the heat of his gaze. It wasn't judgment, just certainty. The same certainty that had infuriated her the day before and steadied her this morning. Clara exhaled slowly. Fine, she said. But I'll talk to Henry alone first. He doesn't need 2 adults hovering over him. Holloway nodded. Fair enough. But Black Fox goes with you when you head out to the ranches. Ranches? Clara echoed. A kid might overhear something dangerous, the sheriff said. But grown men say all sorts of things when they think a woman and a Cherokee scout aren't listening. His tone shifted to steel. We need to gather information, and we need to keep you both alive while you're doing it. Clara's stomach nodded. She didn't want to admit how much it comforted her to know Talon would be there. The sheriff dismissed them. And soon Clara and Talon were walking toward the schoolhouse again, this time without the tension from their previous argument. Though the air between them was still charged with something unspoken. "You're quiet," Talon said finally. "I'm thinking," Clara answered. "About what?" She shot him a look. "About how I somehow ended up working side by side with the most stubborn man in all of Indian Territory." He didn't smile, but his eyes warmed with the closest thing to amusement she'd ever seen. "You think I'm stubborn? You accused me of hiding something before even asking what was wrong." "And I was right," he replied, unbothered. She huffed out a breath. "That's not the point. Then what is?" Clara slowed her steps. "The children will talk to me. But I don't want them feeling afraid." "They should feel aware," Talon corrected gently. "Fear keeps them from doing anything foolish." She looked at him, then really looked at him. The way he carried himself, every step controlled, every sense alert. He wasn't just a tracker. He was a protector. A watcher of things other people overlooked. "Do you ever stop being on guard?" she asked softly. His gaze held hers a moment, steady as bedrock. "No." The honesty in that single word shook something in her when they reached the schoolhouse. Clara found Henry waiting on the steps, clutching a book to his chest. The moment he saw Talon, he froze like a deer at the edge of a clearing. "It's okay, Henry," Clara said softly. "He's with me." Henry's shoulders eased only slightly. Clara knelt. "I need you to tell me exactly what you heard behind the schoolhouse that day." Henry bit his lip and glanced nervously toward Talon, who stayed respectfully back, giving him space. "They said?" Henry whispered, voice trembling. "They said the town ain't ready." "That's what they said. And that someone's going to help them get inside." Clara's heart lurched. Talon stepped forward, voice low and steady. "Someone in town?" Henry nodded quickly. "A man. They said he's already got her picked out." Clara felt the ground tilt beneath her. Her? Talon's jaw flexed. The danger wasn't distant anymore. It was personal. And very, very close. By late afternoon, the sky over the canyon had darkened with rolling clouds, and the wind carried a biting chill that made Clara pull her shawl tighter. She and Talon had ridden hard across the plateau, following the faint tracks Henry had described. Every hoof beat, every snap of a twig under their horses' feet reminded Clara that the outlaws were closer than she dared admit. Even though the boy's whispers still haunted her, Talon rode slightly ahead, scanning the horizon with the trained patience of a scout who had survived more ambushes than most men in Red Butte could imagine. His hair, usually tied neatly, was tousled by the wind. Dust clung to his boots and coat. Yet in every line of his body, Clara saw the unshakable confidence of a man used to danger, and somehow, despite the peril, she felt oddly safe. The first thunderclap rattled through the canyon as lightning forked the sky. Clara urged her horse faster, heart thudding in time with the storm. Rain began to patter, then pour, drenching them within moments. Visibility dropped to near zero, and the muddy trail became slick with red clay. "Keep going," Talon called over the roar, though his voice was calm, commanding. Clara spurred her horse harder, nearly slipping twice. Finally, he held up a hand, and they veered off the trail into a stand of trees. There, half hidden among boulders and brush, was a small, abandoned line cabin. Its roof sagged, its walls were weathered, but it offered shelter barely from the storm. Talon dismounted first, helping Clara from her horse with surprising gentleness. Even soaked through, his presence was steady, grounding her. Inside, the cabin smelled of damp wood and old smoke. Shadows flickered in the corners as lightning illuminated the room. Clara shivered, not just from the cold, but from the closeness of Talon. For a moment, words failed her. She had been so focused on fear and duty. She hadn't considered the human side of this man, the warmth behind those intense eyes, the steadiness of his hands, the way he moved as if he could carry the weight of the world. "You're trembling," Talon said softly. Not teasing, not accusing, just stating a fact. "Sit by the fire." Clara hesitated. I'm fine." "No," he said firmly, his hand brushing hers to guide her toward the embers. The heat touched her skin, bringing color back to her cheeks. "You're scared. That's human. You can't fix everything on your own." For the first time, she allowed herself to lean into him, her shoulder brushing his. The storm raged outside, but inside, a fragile peace settled. Talon's gaze softened, though it remained intense. He seemed to see her, the real Clara, beneath the stubborn, proud exterior she had worn in town. "I shouldn't have left town yesterday," she admitted quietly, her voice nearly drowned by the thunder. "I thought I could manage things myself. I thought I could protect them without getting anyone involved." Talon's eyes darkened, not in anger, but in understanding. "Clara, you're brave," he said. "But bravery without someone watching your back gets people hurt. I've been trying to keep you safe since the first moment I saw how vulnerable the town's little ones were." Her breath caught. The words weren't a reprimand, they were truth. And truth had a way of piercing defenses. "You could have told me," she whispered, almost to herself. "You could have let me in." "I wanted to," he replied. "But you needed to feel in control. And I can't give that to you. Only you can decide to let someone in." The cabin was silent, except for the storm and the occasional drip of water from the roof. Clara's heart raced, not from fear, but from the intimacy of the moment, the way danger had forced them to rely on one another. Finally, she looked up. "I didn't expect you," she said. "Not like this. Not to care." Talon's lips twitched, almost a smile. "I don't do this for anyone. Not lightly. Not ever." Her pulse quickened. "Then why me?" He hesitated. "Because you're different," he admitted. "Because I can't walk away. And because if something happened to you, I'd never forgive myself." The honesty in his voice sent a thrill through her she couldn't name. The storm outside faded into a distant roar. The rain no longer mattered. For the first time since arriving in Red Butte, Clara allowed herself to stop pretending, to stop fighting. She let the warmth of the cabin, the fire, and Talon's presence fill her chest. It was dangerous, impossibly dangerous, but also the most human she had felt in months. A lightning flash illuminated Talon's profile, sharp and unwavering. Clara realized that whatever storms waited for them outside, she could face them with him by her side. Not as protector and protected, not as scout and schoolteacher, but as two people who had, in the space of a single storm, discovered a fragile trust. Nay. The morning after the storm, Red Butte seemed almost normal, too normal. Clara had insisted on returning to town as quickly as possible, despite Talon's reluctance. The rain had washed the streets clean of dust, but not of suspicion. The townsfolk watched them with wary eyes as they rode in, whispers following their every step. Clara gripped the reins tightly, her stomach twisting with a mixture of relief and dread. She knew the calm was temporary. Talon rode beside her, silent, every muscle coiled as though ready to spring at a moment's notice. His hand never strayed far from the rifle slung across his back, and his gaze constantly scanned the rooftops, the alleys, the shadows between buildings. Clara had learned to trust him, but even she couldn't shake the knowing sense that danger lurked. Closer than she liked to imagine. It wasn't long before that sense proved true. As they passed the general store, a sudden commotion caught Clara's attention. A horse whinnied in panic, metal clanged against wood, and voices shouted from behind the building. Clara's heart leapt, then sank when she realized the outlaws were there. 5 men, rough, dirty, armed with revolvers and knives, had cornered a young clerk and were rummaging through crates and barrels. One of them, taller than the others with a jagged scar across his cheek, spotted Clara and pointed. "Well, well," he sneered. "Looks like the lady wants to play hero. Lead us to the rest, girl, or you'll wish you had." Clara's blood ran cold. The words weren't a threat, they were a promise. Her mind raced. Henry's warning. The list. The men in the foothills. They weren't bluffing. Before she could react, Talon nudged his horse forward, keeping his eyes locked on the tallest outlaw. "Step back," he said evenly, but there was steel beneath the calm. "You don't want this fight." The outlaw laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "And who's gonna make me?" "You?" His hand went for his gun. Clara's stomach dropped, but Talon was faster. A sharp whistle, a quick movement, and the nearest outlaw went sprawling as Talon's rifle cracked the air. The others froze, startled, but Talon didn't wait. He kicked his horse into a controlled charge, forcing the remaining men to scatter. Clara's hands trembled as she tried to steady her horse. One outlaw, braver or perhaps crazier, pulled a knife and lunged at her. She screamed, heart hammering. Talon was there in an instant, grabbing the man by the wrist and twisting, disarming him with precise strength. The fight was over almost before it had begun. The men fled, yelling threats over their shoulders, leaving the street eerily silent once more. Clara's legs gave out and she slid from her horse. Talon caught her by the shoulders, steadying her. His eyes, dark and fierce, searched her face. "You okay?" he asked, though his voice betrayed no fear, only concern. I think so," she stammered, still shaking from adrenaline and terror. "But they were after me." Talon's jaw tightened. They were. And that's not the worst of it. They wanted leverage. Someone in town is feeding them information. Clara swallowed hard. "Henry? The list?" He shook his head. "Someone older. Someone who knows more than they should. We have to find them before they strike again." Her mind spun. She had wanted to protect the children, to keep the town safe on her own. She had wanted to control everything. And now, faced with the outlaw's boldness, she realized how naive that had been. Talon's steady presence was the only thing that had kept her from harm. They rode toward the outskirts of town, following the tracks left by the fleeing men. Every step Talon took, every glance he cast, seemed to reassure her. He didn't coddle her, didn't over-explain, but he didn't leave her behind either. The storm from the day before had bonded them. But now this shared danger forged something stronger, mutual reliance, a sense of trust deeper than either had anticipated. As they reached the edge of the river, where the muddy banks bore the tracks of the outlaws' horses, Clara realized just how serious this all had become. Talon dismounted and motioned for her to do the same. "Stay close," he instructed. "We don't know what they're planning next, and we can't underestimate them." Clara followed, her heart pounding, every sense alert. The moment felt like a test, not just of courage, but of the fragile bond forming between them. She trusted him completely, but she knew that one mistake could be disastrous. And yet, even in the face of such danger, she felt a strange thrill and adrenaline-fueled awareness that they were connected in a way no one else in Red Butte could understand. Talon crouched low, scanning the horizon. "They'll be back," he said, voice calm but cold. "And next time, they won't wait for daylight. We have to be ready." Clara nodded. Her fear had not vanished. It could not, but it was tempered now by determination. And by something else, something she didn't dare name yet. The growing awareness that whatever came next, she would face it with Talon, not as a protector in charge, not as scout and teacher, but together. And that made all the difference. The sun had just begun to sink behind the western cliffs, painting the sky in streaks of orange and blood red, when Clara realized she had wandered too close to the canyon's edge. She had been following faint tracks that led toward the river, trying to find clues the outlaws might have left behind. Her eyes were fixed on the mud and footprints, unaware that the ground beneath her horse was uneven and treacherous. A sudden slip of the horse's hoof startled her, and she almost lost her balance. Panic surged in her chest. She barely had time to grab the reins before the animal bolted, dragging her toward the rocky bank. Clara's heart raced. She had no experience with an unsteady horse, and every instinct screamed that the river below was dangerous. Clara. The voice came from somewhere above, sharp and commanding. Talon had been scanning the ridge for signs of the outlaws when he spotted her peril. In a heartbeat, he dropped from his horse and sprinted across the uneven terrain, his long legs covering ground with deadly precision. "Hold on," he shouted again, reaching her just as the horse stumbled on the slick ground. Without hesitation, Talon grabbed her around the waist, pulling her toward the stable part of the bank. His hands were firm and unyielding, anchoring her as she struggled to regain her footing. The horse, sensing its rider was no longer controlling it, bolted toward the cliffside. Talon shoved her to the ground, rolling them both behind a boulder just as the horse disappeared over the edge with a terrified whinny. Clara's breath came in short, ragged gasps, her hands trembling uncontrollably. She looked up at him, heart pounding, fear and something else swirling in her chest. "You're safe," he said, voice steady but low, almost intimate. "I've got you." The intensity of his gaze made her chest ache. For a moment, everything else, the wind, the river, the danger, faded. All that remained was Talon, the man who had risked everything to save her, whose presence had become a constant anchor in her chaotic life. Clara's lips parted, wanting to speak, but words failed her. All she could do was look at him, searching for something she didn't yet fully understand. Talon didn't move away. He stayed close, his hand still lightly gripping her shoulders, ensuring she truly understood she was safe. "I thank you," she managed finally, her voice small but sincere. "You don't need to thank me," he said, a faint edge of steel returning to his tone. "You need to understand something, Clara. This isn't just about getting lucky. They've marked you, and I'm not letting them get the chance to use you." Clara's breath hitched. "Marked me? You mean because of the outlaws?" "Yes," he said, voice low and unwavering. "And because someone in town is helping them. We have to be smart, or this town and you won't survive." Clara nodded, though her mind was spinning. Fear and adrenaline mingled with something else, a raw, undeniable attraction that had been simmering since the storm in the cabin. Every moment Talon had been near her, the way he had watched over her, the calm authority in his voice, the strength in his hands had carved its mark into her heart. "You're amazing," she whispered, almost without thinking. "You always know what to do." Talon's jaw flexed. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he helped her to her feet, steadying her as the wind tugged at their clothes and hair. "I do what needs to be done," he said finally. "And I'm not done with you yet." Clara's chest tightened. The words were simple, yet heavy with unspoken promise. Danger surrounded them, yes, but in that moment it felt as if nothing else existed. She trusted him completely, more than she had trusted anyone before. And though the canyon below reminded her of what could have happened, she knew one thing with absolute clarity: she would never be the same after this. Together, they moved back toward the safer paths, Talon slightly ahead, scanning for signs of the outlaws, and Clara close behind, relying on his strength and guidance. Every step, every glance, every word carried weight. Their partnership had grown beyond necessity. It had become something deeper, something that neither fear nor danger could easily break. For the first time, Clara allowed herself to hope. Not just that Red Butte would survive, but that she and Talon, two people brought together by circumstance, danger, and stubborn hearts, might find something neither had expected: trust, companionship, and the beginnings of love. By late afternoon, Red Butte had begun to feel the weight of unease again. Even with the outlaws driven off the previous day, whispers followed Clara and Talon wherever they went. Townsfolk kept their distance, eyes wary, judging, questioning, afraid to speak openly yet unable to ignore the tension. Clara could feel the prickling of suspicion as she walked beside Talon, her shawl wrapped tight around her shoulders against the cool wind. They had returned to the schoolhouse to speak with Henry and a few other children, trying to gather whatever scraps of information the boy had overheard. Talon stood just outside, keeping watch with the patience only years tracking dangerous men could give. Clara had grown used to his quiet vigilance. It was both comforting and infuriating. Inside the schoolhouse, the children were hesitant at first, eyes darting nervously toward the door and windows. Clara lowered her voice, careful to keep the words simple and calming. "I just need to know what you saw or heard so we can help everyone stay safe," she said. "No one is in trouble, promise." One by one, the children spoke, each detail a thread in the tangled web of danger that had silently spread through Red Butte. Whispered rumors of men in the foothills, plans of robberies, even the mention of a stranger's name, hinted at a betrayal from within the town. Clara's stomach churned. It was worse than she had imagined. Someone trusted, someone familiar, was aiding the outlaws. Meanwhile, outside, Talon's eyes never strayed far from the street. Every shadow, every movement was scrutinized. And when a carriage rumbled past the edge of town, his hand instinctively rested on the rifle slung across his back. His senses were razor-sharp, his body coiled with readiness. Clara had grown used to his intensity, but she still marveled at how he seemed to read the land, the town, and the people as if they were open pages. Once the children had been reassured and sent home, Clara and Talon walked back toward the center of town. That's when they encountered the first overt hostility. A group of townsfolk, led by a burly rancher named James McAllister, stepped into their path. Arms crossed and brows knitted. "Talon," McAllister spat the name, almost like a curse. "I hear you're getting mighty close to Miss James. Some of us don't take kindly to outsiders meddling in Red Butte's business." Clara stiffened beside him, bristling at the judgment. "I assure you," she said, "we're trying to protect the town, everyone in it, including your family." McAllister snorted, shaking his head. "I don't care what your intentions are. You're Cherokee. You're not one of us. And you're meddling in things that don't concern you." Talon's jaw tightened. He didn't reach for his rifle, didn't move aggressively, but the sheer presence of him was enough to make the rancher pause. "I'm here because I promised to keep her safe," Talon said evenly. "And because I promised to keep this town safe. That concerns me enough." The tension stretched like a taut wire. The other townsfolk shifted uneasily, some nodding to McAllister's words, others glancing at Talon with curiosity or quiet admiration. Clara felt the weight of their scrutiny, but Talon's steady gaze never wavered, giving her courage she didn't know she possessed. "And what if I choose to stay by his side?" she asked, her voice firmer than she expected. "Am I not allowed to decide who watches over me and who keeps me safe?" A hush fell over the street. McAllister opened his mouth, but Talon's eyes held him in place. Clara felt the tension ease slightly, but she knew the prejudice hadn't vanished. It had only been silenced. Temporarily, Talon stepped closer to her, not threatening anyone, but clearly placing himself between Clara and the doubt around them. "She decides," he said softly, for her ears only. No one else. Her chest tightened at his words. He didn't need to say more. The quiet protection, the acknowledgement of her agency, made her feel seen in a way no one else in Red Butte had ever done. And yet, beneath it all, the town's whispers and sidelong glances reminded her that danger wasn't just outside the canyon, it could come from anywhere. Even from those they thought they could trust. As they walked away, side by side, Clara realized something that both frightened and exhilarated her. She didn't just trust Talon with her safety anymore. She trusted him with her heart, and in a town filled with secrets, danger, and prejudice. That trust was more fragile and more precious than anything she had ever known. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across Red Butte. Somewhere beyond the hills, the outlaws were still plotting. But now Clara and Talon faced not only external threats, but the town itself, with all its suspicion and fear, as another challenge they would have to navigate together. Night had fallen over Red Butte, and the town lay quiet under a crescent moon, shadows stretching long across the streets and empty storefronts. Clara stood beside Talon near the edge of town, their horses tethered nearby. The outlaws' tracks had led them here again, closer than before. But tonight was different. Talon had a plan. And Clara, despite the tension curling in her stomach, trusted him completely. "They'll try to hit the general store first," Talon murmured, scanning the street. "Then maybe the bank or the ranches. But tonight, they're coming for you." Clara swallowed hard. "For me?" "Yes," he admitted. "They think using you will make the town bend or break. But they're wrong." Her pulse quickened. This was the moment she had feared, and yet she didn't feel powerless. Not with Talon by her side. He had saved her once already. He would do it again. And more than that, she knew she would face whatever came together with him. Not behind him, but alongside him. They moved through the shadows, every footstep silent, every breath measured. Talon's hand rested lightly on the hilt of his rifle, his presence a protective shield Clara could feel more than see. When they reached the main street, the faint sound of footsteps and a low murmur told them the outlaws had arrived. Talon crouched behind a water trough, signaling for Clara to do the same. "Remember what we practiced," he whispered. "Stay calm, stay aware. Watch for openings." The outlaws came into view. 5 men, faces obscured by scarves, guns ready. Their leader, the tall man with the jagged scar, spotted Clara immediately and stepped forward, a cruel smirk on his face. "Well, well," he drawled. "Miss James, looks like the town's favorite schoolteacher finally wandered into our hands." Clara's stomach dropped, but she forced herself to meet his gaze, refusing to show the fear that clawed inside her. She felt Talon's hand brush hers, steadying her without words. "You're not taking her," Talon said, voice low, dangerous, like the growl of a predator ready to strike. The outlaw laughed. "And who's going to stop us? You?" Talon didn't answer immediately. He waited, eyes narrowing, then in a sudden, fluid motion, he moved forward, rifle raised, precise, controlled. Shots rang out and chaos erupted. Clara ducked instinctively, heart hammering, but she stayed close to Talon, her trust in him absolute. The fight was tense and chaotic. Talon moved like a shadow, taking down one outlaw after another with a skill honed over years of surviving the frontier. Clara's courage surprised even herself. She helped where she could, guiding townsfolk who had come out to watch or aid, keeping them out of the line of fire. Finally, only the leader remained. He leveled his gun at Clara, stepping forward with a cruel sneer. Time seemed to slow. Talon's voice rang out sharp, commanding, "You walk away when I'm done talking." Clara froze, caught between fear and awe as Talon stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and the outlaw with a confidence born of experience and love. The outlaw faltered under Talon's gaze, his resolve crumbling. With one swift move, Talon disarmed him, sending the gun clattering across the street. "You think this town is yours to take?" Talon said, voice low and deadly. "Think again." The outlaw hesitated, then turned and ran, disappearing into the darkness. The streets were quiet once more save for the heavy breaths of Clara, Talon, and the few townsfolk who had watched the confrontation. Clara turned to Talon, chest heaving. You saved me again." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled her close, hands on her waist, eyes searching hers. "You don't need saving," he said softly. "You need someone who's willing to face the danger with you." "That's what I am." Her heart leapt. The fear, the adrenaline, the chaos, they melted away under the warmth of his gaze, the strength of his arms. She realized then that she had trusted him fully, not just with her safety, but with her heart. "Trust you," she whispered. "Completely." Talon's jaw softened. For the first time in days, he allowed himself a small smile. "And I'll never let you down." The town of Red Butte, once filled with suspicion and fear, now looked on with newfound respect. The outlaws had been driven off, their plans foiled. And the townsfolk, witnessing Clara and Talon's bravery, began to understand that trust and courage were not bound by heritage or appearances. As they walked side by side, back toward the heart of the town, Clara realized that life in Red Butte would never be the same, not because danger had passed, but because she and Talon had faced it together, unafraid, unwavering, and bonded in a way no storm, no outlaw, no prejudice could ever undo. And for Clara, that was more than enough.